Go. All right, welcome Sabbath School. How was your week this week? I've had it's not been a good week this week. It has been busy, hasn't it? Student-teacher conferences, teacher-parent conferences. When I was a kid, that was never a good day for me. No, they don't. But I can remember my dad coming back from a parent-teacher conference. I think I was on the floor playing checkers with my brother, and he came in and just kicked my shoe and pointed his finger at me and said, "I'm hearing things about you I don't like." I was like, okay. Oh, he explained them to me, but I kind of knew what they were, yeah. And so that, those were interesting times. And we're going through work. We had this merge. I don't know if you heard. Chrysler or FCA or whatever is now merged with this company in France called PSA, and now we're a new company called Stellantis. And they're reorganizing the whole organization. And so my decks and the things I do are changing rapidly. It's been very, very frustrating for all of us and things. And it's, it's just, ugh. But I did get a raise. That was last couple weeks, so that was a good thing. So it's not all bad, but right now it's a little frustrating. Yeah, no, it is more work, I will say that, but it was more than a 2% raise. So. But I am happy about that. So it has been a tough week. Is there anything anybody would like to pray about? Anybody who's ill that we should remember? Or?
Well, mentioned it in church as well, but Betty Hills called or texted me or both, and said that her brother passed away this week from COVID. So I remember her and her family.
Okay. Well, that's tragic. I have felt very fortunate. I did not get the disease, and I'm fully vaccinated, so I'm not really fearful of it at all. Anything else? Anybody else? I'd like to pray for my father-in-law, Jill's dad. We had to move him to a assisted living, and I hope he's not watching this. He might. But he's 94. He's 93. Okay, I'm sorry. I think he's 94. He's been a pastor, an educator, rose all the way to the general conference. He's been an independent, really hard-working person. And now he's finding that, his body is kind of letting him down. And I think it's really, really hard on him. I went and visited him about a week or so ago, and he was like, "I can't believe I'm here, and my house is still there, and I am here." And I felt kind of sorry for him. He's kind of accepted it. He needs to be there. Oh, I'm never good with these things. He's kind of accepted it, but I know he doesn't like it. So I'd like to remember him in prayer that God is still with him, and he knows that. And so forth, and that, life changes, and we got to accept these things. So, pray for that. Anything else? Oh, okay, yeah, I can't say anything. Jill, you told me about that. It's interesting. Your spouse tells you these things, and then you kind of go on. But then, so you bring up. All right. Would you like to bow our heads for prayer? Dear Heavenly and gracious Father, we're so thankful that we can come away from the world and study this lesson. It is a lesson we need to learn. May it enter into our hearts that we must learn how to treat people and treat them well. We also ask for those who we want to remember in prayer here. The Hill family. This dreaded pandemic has taken somebody else. I can say categorically, I am very tired of this. We ask for your mercy. We ask you to take this plague away. But if it is still the last, we ask you to give us strength and security and the promise you will be with us. I pray for my father-in-law who's having a time. You know, Lord, it's hard in this world. We weren't meant to grow old, but we are. And we ask you to be with us. And we ask you to help us look on things the way we should look on things, that there is benefit to depending upon you and you alone. And we ask for our blessing upon our school and our church, our families. Certain families in the school, my wife has told me about them, are having some problems. It's just hard. But whatever problems we have you with us. And may we know that forever. May we study the lesson and study it well. In thy name forever. Amen. All right. Our memory. Some things about the tablets. Sometimes if you touch them inadvertently, they just kind of go nuts on you. Good. The memory verse today is, therefore, love the stranger, for you were strangers in the land of Egypt. 10:19. My daughter, Natalie, she's home right now. She had a medical procedure. She's still recovering from it. And she was on the couch. She came out of the bedroom, was having a little bit of discomfort. She's laying on the couch, you know. I put a blanket over her. The dog is there bothering her. And I'm studying this lesson, and I said to her this. I said, when you hear the word stranger, what do you think? Someone you don't know? But the word itself, what do you think about the word itself? Yeah. It doesn't have a good connotation on it, does it? It says in the encyclopedia, it says, stranger, a person for whom one does not know, or whom one is not familiar. And then it also says a person who does not know or is known in a particular community. And the last thing, a person entirely unaccustomed to the experience or your situation. Doesn't fit in. Stranger Day? Did you see those films when you were young at school? Yeah, I remember those. Stranger Danger. I'd like us to look at Mark 28. And it says here, one of the teachers of the religious law was standing listening to the discussion. He realized that Jesus had answered well, so he asked, of all the commandments, which is the most important? Jesus replied, the most commandment is this, hear, O Israel, is the Lord God is one and only one, and you must love the Lord your God with all your heart and all your soul and all your mind and all your strength. That first part kind of makes sense if you worship God right. You would want to love God with all your heart, all your mind. That kind of makes sense to me. But then he goes to the second one. The second is equally important. Love your neighbor as yourself. No other commandment is greater than these. The teacher of the religious law replied, "Well said, teacher. You've spoken the truth by saying there's only one God and no other. And I know it is important to love him with all my heart and all my understanding and all my strength, and to love my neighbor as myself. This is more important than all the burnt offerings and all the sacrifices required in the law." Realizing this, that the man understood, Jesus said to him, "You are not far from the kingdom of heaven." And after that, no one dared ask him a question. So why would Jesus ask us to do something so contrary to our nature? Well, but we, okay. All right, we have a sinful nature, but I tell my children, hey, be wary of strangers. I mean, don't talk to people you don't know, right? It seems like it makes sense. I mean, we hear of tragedies every day, right? So, what is it? I got a microphone. Would you like to say something?
You know, stranger and stranger. It's totally different. I don't blame Samaritan who loves stranger.
You don't blame him.
No,
I
because
wouldn't blame him either.
this is natural. Especially if you see that stranger in that kind of situation. But sometimes it's very difficult to even think that you love stranger, because you don't know who is that stranger. I was in that situation, and I don't like to share this to somebody else even, you know. Today's world is so different than that one.
Yeah.
And sometimes we, by wrong loving stranger, we come to a big trouble. Yeah. That's the stranger is somebody who I don't know, and maybe you don't know. Yeah. But anyway, during our life, we should love. Love, not to give him something, but share something with him common, you know. This is loving stranger. And I think Christ show exactly by this incident Samaritan who love, how we should approach to that kind of. The one guy who is high authority come and passed away. No, this is not my business. And the second one, a little lower, passed again. Yeah, we shouldn't be like that.
Yeah. Well, how many people are in sales here? Okay. Can you be a stranger to people? Well, why not? Got to meet people, right? If you're in sales, you also got to get to know them, right? Because people don't buy things from strangers. Got to build rapport and so forth like that. I'm in a supplier quality organization. My job is to go out and help the suppliers meet our requirements for parts. I cannot just go out there and be a jerk and say, you're going to do this and you're going to do this. I got to go, as you say, develop a rapport with them so that if there are problems, they will trust me to help them solve it. And they will trust me that when I say, hey, we need to get motivated and do these things, that they know I'm acting not only in the best interest of my company, I'm also acting in their best interest. You're a teacher. Same thing. You can't do your job being a stranger, right? You know, That's okay. I want it away from me, actually.
Testing, testing. What else do you expect the teacher to say? As I mentioned, it makes a big difference whether you're an introvert or an extrovert. Also, we need to keep in mind that there's different types of love. There's the agape love, which Jesus wants us to have to him, and then you have the filial love that you have for one another.
Yes. There's tough. Well, yes. So what is that? I forget what that's the parental love. The storge they call that or something. I can't remember. But yeah. Jesus. You ever wonder why the promised land was where it was?
It's the crossroads.
It's the crossroads of the civilization of that world. And he put them right there. If the Jews were not friendly to strangers, could they fulfill the covenant that they made with God? What? They would be breaking the commandments. Part of the covenant. He put them there so that when all these trade routes from these great civilizations, they would have to come through, and that they would have to tell them, or they would say about Jesus, and being kind to strangers who, let's face it, it isn't like today where you can get in an air-conditioned car, fill it up with gas, turn the radio on, and drive 5 hours. And granted, that's a pretty tough, but you can do that. I do that all the time. It's not a big deal. You just get on the car and go. Those days, there weren't rest stops. You had to go, and you might have to depend on the kindness of strangers.
I'm probably ready to share for you my feeling how to be a stranger. I came from foreign country, and I am a foreign guy in different country. I came without knowledge of language, and nobody knows me, and I know how I feel that time in the beginning, and when I see stranger right now, I share my feeling, how I feel that time, and takes you lots of time to assimilate to different people, to different culture, to different everything. That's we should have some kind of compassion for that people, because if somebody come to you and explain that he lost a child, you can
have
feel
sympathy,
emotionally, but I don't think you feel physically. We have sympathy, and we know how to explain sympathy, but we should have empathy. And empathy is different approach to that people. Not with only feeling, but with doing something.
Yeah. To be empathetic, to kind of, what did I hear? People will remember more how you made them feel than what you may have said. Okay, so we can reveal to people the truth. We can talk to them about the 10 Commandments and so forth. But if we make them feel bad in doing it, well, typically, they're going to forget about what you said whether it's right or wrong, but they're certainly going to remember how you made them feel. You know, and I think that's an important thing to remember.
I have something written in the front of my Bible, and it says, people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care.
That's a good point. Yes?
Let's get simple. How do you feel when you pass someone on the street and he doesn't even say hi to you? And it happens too often.
I was working for my brother-in-law one summer in Indiana. And my brother-in-law had a big farm in Indiana. He farmed a couple thousand acres. He needed a hand to help him out. He told me, because I'd grown up on a farm, I knew how to handle equipment. He said, hey, why don't you come this summer when you're out of college, work for me. I will pay you $9 an hour. At that time, $9 an hour was real good money. So I said, yeah, I'm going to go do that. So and he gave me free room and board. So I was working for my brother-in-law. Now, Michigan's a little different than Indiana. That's not on. So, oh yeah, it is. Okay, Michigan's a little different than Indiana, where I grew up. When I was working on my dad's farm and I drove a truck or a tractor, and we didn't wave to each other at crossroads. In Indiana, when you come up to a crossroad, you see another person, they wave all the time. They do. You know, I remember I came into where his operation is, one of the barns with the truck, and there was one of these guys that waved and stuff, and he came up to me and said, you're going to give Gary a bad name. You better start waving. Now, I thought about that when I was reading this lesson. Were the Jews during Jesus' time known as a friendly people? They weren't, were they? When you read about they didn't like foreigners, did they? They didn't, you know. They didn't like foreigners. They considered foreigners unclean, right? They didn't treat them well. So, if someone on the street were to say to you, is the Seventh-day Adventist church a friendly church? Or if they were to ask you about Seventh-day Adventists, what do you think they would first say? Well, they might say, you know, and I had a boss that said that to me when I started working for this particular individual. I explained to them about Saturday, Sabbath, how I wouldn't be available for that day, and they were just kind of shaking their head. You know, they're like, I've never heard of this before. Who are you people? You know, and I had to explain it to them, and then I can remember this distinctly. They turned around and they said, I don't think this is going to work. And they started walking away, and then they turned around and they said, no, it'll work. I don't like working Saturdays either. So, so it worked out okay for different reasons. But what are some of your impressions that you've had with individuals when they find out you're Seventh-day Adventist?
Well, although this doesn't directly answer your question, but the more I think about it, I think that the whole idea of strangers here that we're talking about in the Bible is less about people you don't know, or maybe said another way, less about peers. Well, okay, they're my peer, I just haven't met them yet, right? They're just not my acquaintance yet. And I think it's more about if we're in a situation where we have some advantage, if we know the customs, we know the area, we have more resources, we have more knowledge, whatever, how do we treat people who are in a lesser situation? And I'm not just saying, again, not just financially, maybe lesser in other ways. How do we treat them, right? Because a lot of it, to me, comes back to God is infinitely more powerful than we are, and yet how does he treat us? And then if we go back to the parable of the king who forgave the massive, lifelong, unpayable debt to the man, and then he goes out and he calls on his neighbors and says, you owe me $10, and I'm going to have you thrown in debtor's prison. To me, that's kind of the foundational parable for what we're talking about. God treats us, he could treat us as strangers because we've rebelled and we've gone off the reservation and we're strangers to him, but he treats us so well that if we then turn around and treat others differently, when they don't know what they should be doing, they don't know the area, they're foreign, they don't speak the language, they don't, whatever the case may be, and we take advantage of them, because the lesson brings that out too. There were lots of times in the history of the children of Israel where they took advantage of strangers, they oppressed them, they took advantage of them monetarily, they made them slaves, they did, and God says, I took you out of that same situation and did for you, and then you turn around and do the exact opposite to others. That's not how it's supposed to be. So I just wanted to present that idea. To me, I don't see it as much as peer-to-peer as when we have it over other people, and then we could do one of two things. We can use that to our advantage, or we can help them. That's what I wanted to add.
We are more than somebody else. The difference between any group of people or how can I put this? It is only by the grace of God that it's not us or you. I think that when we stop and take that attitude, it is easier to be more compassionate towards others. I think that generally people get on a high horse. Well, I'm a Christian. More than that, I'm an SDA. And I've got all this knowledge, and I've got this education. I got this little bit of money. So now I think I'm better than others. And sometimes we approach the gospel like we're doing somebody a favor to share it with them.
Yeah, I can see that. And it is, you're right, we are taught to try to be, let me put it to you this way. My parents, they came from the school, you don't ask anybody for anything. You work hard, you earn money, you never go on any assistance, you never take charity. They were generous in giving charity. They help people out generously, but you never take anything from anybody. And my father would heavily criticize people for not if someone wasn't taking care of their family, he did not like that about a different individual. He looked very down on that. But at the same time, I put up to him, do you really know all these people's situations? And he would say, well, I heard this certain person did this. He heard one of his neighbors, they were hurting for money, and he found out in the parking lot of the factory, he was playing check poker, where they have it's weird. They play a little game, and he lost his check. And my father did not have a lot of sympathy for this guy. But at the same time, like you say, maybe we should have the kind of sympathy for people. We shouldn't look at us as being superior. That's good.
Like I said, stranger and stranger is two different persons. A few weeks ago, one of the strangers come to my door and begged me for money. I said, for what reason? Oh, I stuck with my car and I couldn't go and I don't have anything with me. I say, okay, I can loan you that money. Yeah, all right. He asked me how to repay this. I said, put to my mailbox. All right. 2 weeks and nothing. This is one stranger. And the second stranger called me this last week and say, George, you remember 25 years ago you rebuilt my piano and I need your service. I said, okay, fine. And I came to that lady and I recognized her. I recognized piano, and I fixed that piano, tuned. And I feel that I should do a little bit more. I always take care by literature in my toolbox. And she said, oh, you still going to that church? I said, where? On Haggerty. I said, yes. This is my church. And this is the beginning to share with strangers, my feeling. And we talk, and I talk more than half an hour with her. And she become, something interesting. What's the difference between churches and churches? And I try to explain, but if you explain too much, is really too much for her. But what's the difference on this or that? I said, it's much better if I give you books. I give her 3 books, which that question which she asking will be in that book. That, our duty to make friends even from strangers, but share this thing which we know about salvation. That was duty for Israel. And God said, remember, you were a stranger where? In Egypt.
So remember what I did for you. Go and do likewise. Now, is that a duty that God expects of us? No, we're yes.
We have to be careful not to be too hard on the Israelites in the Old Testament times. When you think of what they went through, they were steeped in heathenism, and the way they were treated by the non-Jews, you can hardly blame them.
I can see that. You can hardly blame them. But they were called to be God's special people, right? They had a mission. God just didn't put them there in that area of the world arbitrarily. For the YouTube. Streaming. Okay. No, I got that. You pass that for a round if you'd like. Is our church a special church? Do you believe the Seventh-day Adventist Church is special? Why? What's that mission? 3 angels' message. He says that. He says that in Revelation 14:19, the 3rd angel's message. Okay? When we use the word special, what do you think that means? You're called out, right? No, well, better than, no. But, all right. It's, pardon? Something unique.
Is this on?
Yeah.
More is expected of us.
More is expected of you.
Yes, not just whatever the going thing is in the world. God expects more.
I've had a boss just for a brief time, maybe a month. His name is Joe Farrar. He's not my boss anymore. It was last week I found out he wasn't going to be. But, because of all the reality. I found out Joe was a Naval Academy graduate, Marine Corps option, and that he was Marine Force Recon, which is their version of the Navy SEALs. He was Special Forces. And I was out with him one time, and I was kind of inquiring, were you in this situation? I can't talk about that. Or I can't talk about that. Basically, he can't talk about anything he did in the Marine Corps because he was considered special. And he is held to a higher standard, even today, that he's not in the Marine Corps than other things. He is under oath. He cannot talk about certain things that he's done. Okay? You say, I agree with you. We're special, right? God's special. We're called out. No, it's not a bad thing. But are we called to a higher standard? Okay? How does that make you feel? Does that make you feel good? Or does responsible? I hate being responsible. Because that makes me feel obligated.
We are special to fulfill our duty that given by God. That's the specialty is for us. God said that I chosen you to proclaim my message to other people. That's the speciality is about.
I believe we are here to proclaim his message. But how do we do it? I think matters. As you said, what you written in the Bible,
Yeah.
People
Don't care what you know until they know how much you care.
care. Yeah. How much you care. We can explain up and down to people the truths of the Bible. But if we are not a loving group of people, right, no one's going to care. And that, I think, is very key. I told you about a boss that when they found out I was Seventh-day Adventist, they didn't know what it meant. I had another boss, Herb Mattis. When he found out I was a Seventh-day Adventist, you know what his reaction was? First thing he says, I got to watch my mouth around you. It's a good thing. And, believe it, he trusted me more because I was a Seventh-day Adventist than his other people in his group. In fact, he gave me extra assignments. I started wondering, is this a good thing? And one time I said, Herb, what is this? What are you doing? And he kind of said, oh, I grew up in Grand Ledge, Michigan. The influence of the Seventh-day Adventists coming there for camp meeting rubbed off on him. He had great respect for us because of what he saw. And he was more open to hearing about Jesus from Seventh-day Adventists than other people.
One way we do it is by example and influence.
Okay? And communication. But if
Is it our duty to love others, or is it because we have a relationship with Christ that we will love others?
Well, that's a good point. What do you think? Do you think it's the former or the latter?
Yes.
Well, well, it can start out as feeling a duty, right? Because
I think only when you appreciate how much God loves each one of us, and we are understanding of that, then that will transform our heart to love others.
Yes.
If you think that God hates you, you're not going to love your neighbor. You're not going to love anyone. Okay? You're going to have envy and strife and anger in your life. You're not going to be go out there and loving your people around you if you think God hates you. Okay.
And that's kind of, some of the Pharisees had that kind of view of God. God's mad at me, so I got to please him, right?
If it's only if we have the love of God in our hearts, are we enabled to love others. Without God's love, you might be polite and kind, but you really are not going to
You're not going to love. Yeah, you might be polite or kind, or you may engage with them to get something from them, but you don't really care about them, right?
I guess I would just add that love doesn't take over our free will. Love doesn't make us do something, right? I mean, I can just think of lots of examples. I mean, Jesus prayed to God and said, if it be possible, take this cup from me, right? Does that mean that Jesus didn't love God, right? Because he didn't want to do it, right? And yet he did go through with his duty and go to the cross, right? So I just would point out that we can love God and still have struggles with not wanting to do what we know we need to do, and we still have free will. And so, yes, I believe the answer is if we love God, then that love shines through us and makes it easier for us to love our neighbors. But we still have a duty, and sometimes it's just we only do it because we know we should, not because we feel loving that particular day. Does that mean if I wake up this morning and I say, well, I don't really feel like going to church today, I don't feel the love today, so I'm just going to skip? Some days I come because I know I should, and I don't feel like it, but I do anyway. So I just don't want to deny that human nature still exists, our free will still exists, duty still exists, even in the presence of the love of God. That's my opinion.
Yeah. Oh, yes. I think duty does exist, and it's very important. There are a lot of times I've done things. I mean, I was in one situation where I was working with an individual that I absolutely despised. And this was I started having feelings. If we were at a bus stop and a bus was coming, I might push that person out in front of that bus. I disliked them so bad. And I realized, as a Christian, God pokes your conscience. Can you really have these thoughts and call yourself a Christian? You can? But they're kind of inconceivable. It's not right, is it? That is the key right there. All of a sudden, I started getting this feeling, pray for that person. And I was like, I don't want to pray for this person. And I pray for this. So I started praying for this person. And somebody started telling me of how they grew up. They grew up in a really bad situation. And other things. And then I started feeling differently towards this person. That maybe if I was in the same situation that they were in, I wouldn't be as good a person as they were. And maybe I was there to help that person. I think you had your...
So you turn to your spouse and you say, you better love me because it's your duty, right?
I don't need to repeat it.
Keep going. What were you saying?
So you turn to your spouse and you say, you better love me because it's your duty.
I worked with a girl at the hospital who God, I am sure, gave her to me as a test. And I always seem to get stuck working with her. And I told the little housekeeper one day, I said, you know, I keep praying that God will work with me and make me be a better person to her because she is just so ornery. And she said to me, you know what? Maybe you need to pray that God changes her. And I thought, well, I never thought of it that way. I've been praying that God gives me patience with her.
I think this young lady right there, then we'll come.
I guess I agree with Nick here, that yes, it is our duty to love, but many times in any human relationship we love out of a principle because we know, our feelings will get the better of us when we're in situations, and we know that God commands for us to love our neighbor as we love ourselves, and be Christ-like, and so forth and so on. And sometimes you need that even in your home life. You don't always feel, we can't just go by our feelings, but we know that the principle of love will be there if we ask God to help us act on what He asks us to do.
Yes.
So the duty and the compassionate feeling of knowing what's right go together.
Yes.
If we tie it back to the lesson in terms of strangers, and maybe to this sense of duty thing, there are lots of times when I'm have an opportunity to help someone and I help them, not sometimes out of because I love them or I'm empathetic or compassionate or anything, but to be honest, right? Because I think we can be honest here. There are times when I help people because I don't want to stand before my Lord and say I didn't. So if I don't know if that's to me I would call that duty. I would say, hey, I'm not feeling it today, Lord. I really don't want to help this person, but I know that I should. And you said that if you do it for this person, you're doing it for me. So I'm going to do it, right? I'm going to pull myself up by my bootstraps, and I'm not feeling it, and I really don't want to, but I'm going to do it anyway. I don't think that's necessarily wrong. I think that's human. I think it's normal. And sometimes God gives you the love for that person after you've already helped them, right? And so sometimes the help comes first, and then you understand them later.
This gentleman, and then Ken will get to you.
Nice discussion about duty. But I think the Bible say exactly what is our duty and how it looks our duty. When Christ show us what is just, He give us example. A gentleman who come to the pray in a synagogue and say, I doing this and this and this for you, and I'm not kind of guy like that one. He fulfilled his duty, and everybody even know and saw this. And Christ said, this is not the way to fulfill that duty. We should know how to understand this word duty. This is our responsibility, yes, but how we do this responsibility, from our form only doing or from our heart to serve to Jesus. This is different way to fulfill that duty.
I was just going to say, just in taking off what Nick was saying, I think that's why the first and greatest commandment is to love God, because if it was just to love our fellow man, I think we would fall short. But that commandment to love God first is what enables us to love one another. In other words, loving God is actually the precedent to loving one another. So you cannot say those two commandments are equal, because love of God enables us to love one another.
Okay. Yes. Get the microphone over there. Oh, good. I got the microphone again.
I just wanted to say that, oh, is it my turn?
Yeah.
Oh, I just wanted to say that people typically remember what you've done for them as opposed to what you've given them.
Mm-hmm.
And also, Micah tells us in chapter 6 that the Lord requires us to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. So those are requirements, I think, as far as if we've got the truth. I think that we need to absolutely live according to that truth. And the Lord requires more of us than just knowing the truth.
And we've been talking about duty and love and where they kind of intersect. And oftentimes the motivation for helping people, like you say, sometimes is duty because God calls us to do it, right? He's called us to be a special people, which means like my former boss, Joe, who was in the Marine Corps, the Special Forces there, he's held to a higher standard. He's told, you can't tell about anything you did at this time. You need to be quiet. He's, all right, that's my duty. I will do that forever. And for us, we have that duty to reach out, to spread the three angels' message. But also, it's got to transition into love, right? I would think there needs to be that inflection point where it's not just duty anymore. That the love of God comes out in it. Because, like you're a teacher, all right? If it was just a job, how would that affect your performance? All right? It's that growth process where we just don't keep the law because it's a duty. We start keeping the law because it's who we are. It's an amazing thing, isn't it? When you look back at how you were when you were young, and now you're at this stage in your life, and you think, how did I get here? And you start to realize it wasn't anything you did.
But Christ said, Christ have passion too. He has passion to his work and compassion to other people. If you read Matthew 14:14, you have exact story of Christ's life. He feel that compassion for people, but he was Christ who has passion to preach the gospel.
I'd like to move to Wednesday's lesson. One of the reasons I like to move this is because I had to write a paper in college on the book of Amos. And he talks about this. And in Amos, Amos chapter, what is it here? Amos, well, 4:1. Chapter 4, verse 1. He says, "Listen to me, you fat cows of Samaria, you women who oppress the poor and crush the needy, and are always asking your husbands for another drink." Do you know the story behind this? What God called Amos to do? Amos is of the southern kingdom. He's from Judah. And God tells him, I want you to go to the northern kingdom, and I want you to preach to them. And at this time in the kingdom of Israel, they're prosperous. They're having a golden age. Everybody is rich. Or, well, not everybody's rich, but they're having a good economic time. And people are taking advantage of other people. And God tells Amos, who is not a prophet. Actually, when I did the paper, I found out he was probably an estate manager. And he was actually pretty wealthy. He was kind of knew what he was doing and so forth like that. But God calls him and says, you're to go up here and start preaching to these people. And he calls them cows. If someone were to call me, I mean, I am fat, I know that. But if someone were to call me, you're just fat, I might not look real, happy on them. And if someone were to call me a cow, and well, he's aiming at females, but I don't think that's a good thing to call a woman. That's not a compliment, no. Does God expect us to be concerned about social justice? Because the northern kingdom, these rich people are taking advantage of the poor. Now, social justice is hard. Well, are they that different? Okay. But should we not be concerned about the poor in this society? 100%. Should we not be concerned about those that are being mistreated? Yep. So I think we're in agreement that God says we should be concerned about social justice. I think you want to say something, Ken?
I was just agreeing that there is a difference between the way God defines social justice and the way society defines it today.
Okay. All right. So how does God define social justice?
God defines social justice as everybody is equal in his eyes, that he is an image, that they were created in his image, that we all come from the hand of God and the breath of God.
Love your neighbor as yourself.
Social justice is basically manipulation.
You're saying today it's
correct.
It's I can see some of that. I mean, just so you know, I'm a very conservative individual. I am. Mr. Toppenberg? Yeah. You don't have anything?
I was going to piggyback on that a little bit and say, isn't love my neighbor as myself mean if I'm willing to fund my 2 kids' college, shouldn't I be willing to fund somebody else's?
That's a good question.
If I love my neighbor's son as much as I love my son, looking myself in the mirror, there's a young man here that's going to be going to Eastern. He doesn't have the funding my 2 boys have. What am I doing about it?
That's a good question.
Not enough, apparently.
But, go ahead.
Because people ask, do you just give them whatever they ask? Do they have responsibility? Do you have to dig into, does the need really exist? I mean, the Bible says, we can wrestle with it. The Bible says if you don't work, you don't eat.
Okay.
So
It does say that.
I'm not giving that as an answer. I'm just saying it's a complicated answer, right? Because to David's point, you can't pay for everybody.
No.
You can't pay for everybody to go to college. You can't just give everything you have away. And so, should we help? Yes, but it's a complicated issue is all I wanted to add.
It is a complicated issue. Especially today. But you know something? If I were to buy a car from you, Nick, let's say you had a car for sale. Yeah, but let's say you had one for sale. You're typically going to say, this is what the car's worth, and may add a little more to it. I'm going to come to you and I'm going to say, I want to buy this car for the lowest price. And so we dicker and we wind up in the middle, right? Okay. But what if we came in at this differently? What if you say, Matt's my church brother. I'm going to give this car to him for the lowest amount of money I can. And I come to Nick and I say, you know what, Nick's my church brother. I'm going to give him the full value and maybe a little bit more for this car. And all of a sudden we start dickering and we wind up in the same place, right? So a lot of times the way I kind of look at it, it's the attitude that we come with on this social justice. Yes, I realize it's been unfair. Yes, I'm going to help you, and we're going to extend things. And we're going to help you, as you say, maybe get a college education and things like that. But how we approach it and how we talk to people and the attitude, we're probably going to wind up in the same place. But I kind of like the latter example of how we felt, how we got there, than the former. And how we respond to that is, I think, very, very important. And when Amos came up there, I don't think he was criticizing them for being rich. I think he was criticizing them. You're taking advantage of all these people. What are you doing?
All that system and judging system was corrupt. That's the God sent him there. You know, and they even, judges accept bribery. What about today? I think the word bribery, it's quite popular.
So you're saying I can't rip you off to help someone who needs more help than you do?
No, I don't think you can. I don't think the ends do not justify the means.
No.
And that that doesn't work. Okay, I think we're coming to a close here. Why don't we have closing prayer? Our dear Heavenly and gracious Father, we're thankful for the discussion we had here. We ask you to bless us and that the rest of this service go well. May we remember what is written here in Deuteronomy, that we are to treat our neighbors as we would like to be treated. In thy name forever. Amen.